Yo guys, I'm Niek from the Produce School and welcome back to a brand new video. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make an Afterlife style track in the style of Tale of Us. Tale of Us is known for their deep and melodic sound, and I'm going to discuss all of the elements in their tracks today. Here is a preview of what you can expect in this video. Let's now dive straight into the project. First off, I want to start with the synths, and the main synth of this project is definitely the bass, and the bass in this project sounds like this. You can hear it's a really fat saw bass, but it's nothing too complicated, and I'm going to show you the preset right now. The preset is from our latest sample pack, Astral, which is a melodic house and techno inspired sample pack. If you want, you can check that out in the link in the description. The bass consists out of two saw waves, which are both pitched down to octaves. Then we have an envelope which is shaped pretty shortly, linked to the MG-Low 18 filter. There's also some white noise on top of it, and then you already have the base of this sound. Then we added some distortion, a little delay which you will also hear if you listen carefully to the bass, a reverb to add a bit of room to the sound. We also linked the velocity to the cutoff, and then we did some tiny changes on the bass, so the note sounds a bit different every time it hits, and that gives it a really unique vibe. In the end I turned the velocity up and then it sounds like this. But if you listen to the beginning, filter sounds way more closed, so that's a cool trick to use. I also showed that in a previous video already. On top of that I have a simple plug which sounds like this. The plug is also from Serum, and once again it's two saw waves. You will see a lot of saw waves in this style, as you can use it for basses, plugs, leads, and you can just use it for basically anything that you want to make. So for this plug we went for two saw waves once again, and then an envelope to an MG-Low 24 filter. So in the oscillator section it looks pretty similar to the actual bass preset that I showed you previously, but the difference will be made in the post-processing when we add some delay and reverb to it. As I told you, there's a delay and a reverb on it. Especially the delay makes a huge difference on sounds like this. The delay just makes sure that it keeps playing and it doesn't suddenly stop, and that can give a really cool sound. I also added an EQ to get rid of the low mid and some of the treble frequencies. These two elements together with a kick can already form a pretty minimalistic drop that sounds pretty cool. So now let's move on to a top lead for the second part of the drop. For the second part of the drop I have this melody which sounds like this. It's a really simple melody, as these notes just stay on the E, and then on top we have some variation going on. As you can see and probably hear as well, the velocity changes here as well, and that is also linked to the cutoff, so you can use that on basically any sound if you just want to add some variety to it. It might not surprise you, but this lead is also a saw based lead with some noise going on, linked to an MG-Low 18 filter. So once again, pretty similar sound. But now the envelope is shaped a bit differently. We added some attack and we added a bit more noise, and then you get a really cool sound. Also, as you can see, oscillator B is pitched up one octave, and we added some fine tune for the analog vibe. Then there's some tape distortion to add a bit of harmonics to the sound, and an EQ to balance the sound a bit more. Also on this sound we added a delay. The time is set to 3, and we added a bandpass filter. The bandpass filter is really useful for these kind of sounds, because you don't want the delay to be as prominent as the main hit, but you still want it to be there. So in that case you can add a bandpass filter, and then the delay will become much more subtle. Also we have this delay with quite some decay, and the wet level set to 65%. Then there's a simple EQ just to get rid of the low frequencies so it doesn't clash with the bass line. These are already the synths for the drop. Let's move on to the build-up synths. First of all, we have a really huge synth, which is playing a cool progression with a top melody on it, and that sounds like this. As you can see, those bass notes change while the drop only plays an E, but that's just to make the build-up a bit more unique and make it a bit more ambient as well, because those notes add some variety and just make it sound really cool. The synth is Synth Empire from Astral, and it's a really cool synth with the basic mini and the wavetable. And then the key part of this synth is once again this automation to all kind of parameters, but that's something I already told in another videos, but it's a really cool synth. Next up we have a top synth, which is playing the same top melody as the previous synth, and that sounds like this. As you can hear, it's a bit more rhythmic, and that's something that you hear a lot in Afterlife style today as well. Those analog stutter kind of leads and basses, and I try to recreate that here. The synth is really cool. As you can see, there's LFO 1 with the BPM turned off and a really slow rate linked to all kind of parameters. That just makes the sound change gradually when you're playing it. And then we have LFO 2, which is on 1/8, and that's linked to the low 18 filter. That gives that rhythmic stutter vibe to the sound. Then there's a distortion, a flanger, a chorus, a delay, a reverb and an EQ. So quite a lot of processing, but that's just to make the sound more unique. You can just play around with these kind of effects till you have something that you really like. But the base of these sounds is really a LFO, which is just playing a certain rate, and also another LFO, which just gradually changes the sound when it's playing. In the build-up I also use the ARP and the lead that I also used in the drop, and that's it for the synths in the build-up. These are all the synths from the project. Let's move on to the drums. So right now you see all the drums already in your screen, and you might be surprised with how little drums are actually in it. And that's because less is more in this style, and if you keep it really simple but with a lot of powerful sounds, it can sound really simple but still really cool to listen to. So we have a really punchy kick, which is from the Astral pack, and that sounds like this. And then a percussion to get a bit of the groove going. Also at the end of every bar there is a clap. This clap has delay on it and it's filtered, and that gives a really cool effect. There's also some reverb on it, and that sounds like this. In the second part of the drop there are some heads added to it. One of them sounds like this. There's also a bit of delay on it. And then there is a hi-hat pattern which is playing a 1/16 rhythm with some simple velocity changes to give it a bit of the human feeling. Then we also add a top loop and a clap. And that's it for the drums. Then let's move on to the next part, which is the FX. It's really important to have some cool FX in these kind of tracks, just to glue everything together. So first of all, in the build-up, I added this tonal ambience, which is pretty low, but it just adds the texture behind all the other elements. In the intro, I added a riser and an uplifter, and we did the same in the build-up, so that's pretty similar. And there's also an impact between the intro and the build-up, and between the first part of the build-up and the second part of the build-up. Then, just before the drop hits, we have an impact and a down filter playing, and that sounds like this. Keep in mind that it's not hitting exactly on the kick note, but it's just hitting one beat before, and that sounds like this. You can also hear that in tracks like Anima Running and in some other big melodic techno tracks. Lastly, let's move on to the automations. And the automations are pretty simple, as They're mainly doing something in the build-up, and as you can see, we have some band 1 frequency automations, so that's just adding a high pass filter to the sounds, and we're also automating the volume of the plug. We also add some cutoff to the synths and the leads, and we added a panning effect to the sounds as well. That's just simply automating the amount of the panning of the synth, and it gives a really cool effect. I also should not forget about the pre-drop vocal, which sounds like this.
Spiritual experience.
It's a really cool robotic kind of voice. We added a EQ on it, which is doing some filtering. We added a reverb and a pretty big delay, and that sounds like this.
Spiritual experience.
These are all the elements of the track, and I will now show you guys the end result.
Spiritual experience.
If you guys have any questions regarding this project, make sure to leave a comment. If you want to download this project, it's included in the Astral bundle, and it's a third project file that you can find in there. I hope you guys learned a bit more about the Afterlife style. We're also planning on doing a live 1 hour long tutorial, but we still have to check how we can do that the best, so stay tuned for that as well. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.